All right, well, welcome everyone. Arborist call, February 11th. We'll get going, a lot to talk about today. Glad everyone, I'm gonna actually go to presentation mode. That makes the screen a little easier to see. A lot to talk about, same kind of format as usual, just a quick welcome intro. We'll do the, kind of the consensus node updates, status updates. Deirdre on ZebraD, I'll give a quick one on Zcash D. And then we just have a generic presentation slot. We cover different topics. Today, Nate wanted to kind of speak for a few minutes on community engagement. So we'll talk about that. NU5 Orchard, which is, Zip 224, Halo 1 Zcash, whatever you'd like to call it. So that's kind of the bulk of where we'll spend our time, and then just kind of a wrap up. For those that might not be familiar, Arborist calls are monthly calls where protocol contributors convene to discuss upgrade timelines and process, R&D efforts, design and implementation, new features, etc. The purpose is to make protocol development more accessible for a wider set of participants, and then also to kind of provide transparency for the community at large. Again, by recording these, we make them available, and then folks can go back and watch them that might not be able to attend due to constraints in their schedule or time zones or whatever the challenge might be. Anyone can participate to talk. And again, we try to keep focused on protocol, the protocol itself, but just email me, Steven@electriccoin.co, or you could tag me like in the forum or something, or any way you'd like to get in touch is fine. Yeah, that's kind of the intro. So Deirdre, I will turn it over to you. I can stop sharing if you've got something you'd like to present.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, all yours.
Let's see. Where's the right one? There it is. Way too many screens. Okay. Hi, I'm Deirdre from the Zcash Foundation. I'm one of the engineers on Zebra, our almost all Rust new implementation of the Zcash protocol. And since we were last on a call together, we have done a lot. We did our first alpha release right before the December Arborist call. I forget, it was right around that time. And since then we've done two more. We're doing 2-week sprints now, and we try to do a release the end of every sprint, so approximately every 2 weeks, and we've done that 2 sprints in a row so far, so that's good. Since our first alpha release, we have taken a node that was pretty reliable and it would sync and might not hang on you to one that will probably never hang on you, at least when you run it for 2 weeks or more. We have one known panic that occasionally happens when you're shutting down the node, but now we can run it for much longer, for much more reliability, and keep up with the tip on mainnet with no lag. It's very nice. It keeps up with the tip very nicely. We've also merged in a bunch of other code. We've merged in some stuff like if you turn on a feature flag, you can report panics to Sentry. If you want to use Sentry integration, we use it when we deploy our nodes every time that we merge, so that we can catch panics as we run, as we sync all the way from the Genesis block to the tip of mainnet every time that we merge code, and it helps us catch panics as they happen live, and they don't happen that often, so that was nice. A lot of API stuff, fixing panics, cleaning up some stuff. Our most recent release, we merged in our asynchronous API to allow us to do Groth16 proof verification via an async API. This calls into the Bellman library, but it wraps it up in a way so that we can dispatch these proof verification requests in an asynchronous way. This was code that Henry DeValance started, and Jane Lothrop, sorry, that's not her last name, Jane, our developer, got over the finish line. We added our responsible security disclosure policy, bilaterally agreed to with the ECC. So they are on our, we call it responsible disclosure.md, but we might probably want to rename it to security.md, and we are listed on there. So that means that if we find a bug or the ECC finds a bug with respective implementations of Zcash, we are going to try to communicate that to each other respectfully and in a responsible manner that may or may not be disclosed immediately to the community, but also includes like good faith working relationships with other security engineers and people who might be trying to improve our code or the ECCs by finding security vulnerabilities. A lot of other little thingies, things that are coming up. We just merged into Bellman the Groth16 batch verification optimization math so that you can verify a whole bunch of Groth16 proofs in one fell swoop, 3 to 4 times faster than if you tried to verify all of them individually. This just got merged into Bellman. That hasn't been cut or released yet, but we will be I'm pulling it in imminently so that when we start validating proofs live as we sync, it'll be really, really, really fast. And some of the other things that we currently have in flight, like I said, the Groth16 stuff, pulling in those verification keys and verification parameters for Groth16 for sapling from commonly used crates, and a bunch of little improvements. We've been doing a deep dive into the oldest code in Zebra, which is our networking code, because the very first part of Zebra was the Zebra-network crate, written in like September and October 2019 as a proof of concept to see if whether our architectural principles and design principles would actually work. It works, but it needs a little bit of refactoring. So we're in the middle of doing that right now. And you'll see another alpha release for Zebra a week from Monday, thereabouts. For the future, so I think we'll be talking a little bit later in the call about that, but we are happy to see that Hudson has started the Zcash R&D Discord, and a bunch of us hopped onto it. So Hudson, did you want to talk about that for a quick second?
Yeah, just like 30 seconds. Basically, people approached me and were like, how can we make comms better in Zcash? What can we bring from Ethereum? Because I'm kind of in Ethereum land a lot doing communications and protocol developer liaison work. So I talked to Sean, some people at the ECC and the Zcash Foundation, and we have this Discord server that's purely technical talk. We have pretty strict rules that we're not going to have a governance discussion. There's not going to be like, it's not a help desk or anything like that. It's a place where the different orgs and teams and people can come together, code, ideate, that kind of thing, and bring in new developers so that they can stay up to speed. So join that. And there's some other like little bits and pieces that I can explain later if there's time, but I don't want to take up too much time on the call.
Cool.
Great.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we gave that a shout out before I forgot, because we're going to try and move a lot of discussion on sort of generic Zcash stuff over there.
Thank you, Hudson.
Invite link in the chat.
Oh, thank you. I'm trying to think of anything that's currently in flight that's worth mentioning, but I think those are the big ones. If you want to see what we're working on, a lot of our stuff is open in the PRs on github.com, Zcash Foundation /Zebra/polls. And then for the next the next bit, we have to figure out where Halo and Orchard are going. I've been looking forward and watching all of the spec changes land for the protocol spec. Very happy to see those coming in, and very happy to see the docs in the books for Halo 2 and Orchard getting populated in their repos with their associated crates. Very happy to see those. These are all the things that we had available for Sapling when Sapling was activated, and we're trying to keep track of all of them so that we can have them all available to us as we implement Halo/Orchard. So the things that we see that are in progress include the spec. The implementation is in progress and has been for a while, but code is getting moved around, I can see. Things that we don't really see right now include a Halo 2 like white paper or an e-print or something that includes all of the bells and whistles since the original Halo paper. So if anyone has any information about that, having an equivalent to that, because for sapling, there was Groth 16, a bunch of papers like that. So if we
that is in progress.
Awesome. So
but
I
not
can
public.
update that. Great.
So is the security proof as well.
Oh,
In
awesome.
progress. Yep.
I was very happy. Is that Halo 2 or is that all of Orchard?
That's Halo 2,
Okay.
which includes Orchard.
Right.
Yep.
Wait, or is it
Well,
the other way around?
The security proof is for Halo 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. We found the sapling proof with Ariel and Dara like the other day, and I was very happy to have it because I wanted to compare it to like everything that we have available for, you know, for the spec and for Orchard. So if anyone is interested in that, I found it on the GitHub repo. The spec is in progress. Orchard security proof, is it going to be just Halo or anyone?
I will try and work on an Orchard security proof. It won't be available on the same time scale as the Halo.
Under the spec.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, sorry, Halo.
And by the way, Sean said to send his apologies. He couldn't join us today. He had kind of a conflict that he couldn't get out of. But I thought I'm not sure we're planning to do an Orchard security proof itself. Just the Halo, which covers the kind of.
I see.
I mean,
okay.
So
I may have misunderstood.
If I have time, I'm going to take a stab at that.
Great.
Based on the sapling proof.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
we haven't committed to having that.
Okay.
So.
And I'll run through these and then I'll hand over my mic.
Okay. Sure. We're going to cover some of these very same things anyway, but yeah. Sure.
Spec audit whenever the spec is ready. Whenever the first draft of the spec or updated for Orchard, I assume that's going to get audited. I think we've talked about that before.
Yep. It is. We're very close to closing an arrangement with a vendor now. I won't name them because the call's recorded, but everyone would be very happy with the choice. So
great.
And we're looking for, actually, just so everyone's perfectly clear, multiple audit types. So not just an audit of the protocol and the software, but the cryptography as well. And
fabulous.
Peer review of the scientific peer review of the crypto itself.
Very looking forward to any public news you will share about that anytime soon.
Yeah, we will.
And then the Halo 2, Orchard, Libra Zcash, Bellman, and all the ZK crates and some Zcash Ds all in progress. We are we're still implementing a bunch of consensus rules for Canopy on down, but we are following all of that. And then the implementation, so once the implementation is locked-ish, you mentioned you're already lining up auditors.
Right, for both spec and implementation.
Fabulous. And then testing stuff, we'll be needing to work with you guys about updates to Zebra, updates to Zcash D, and the cross integration stuff. We deploy a couple of nodes every time that we merge, so that it's like a small blip in terms of it doesn't affect the consensus of the network to have two nodes in a sea of like 500 or 600, but better integration testing between us as we approach a fully validating Halo/Orchard node with you will be good. So that's all stuff that sort of like, that's parity with sapling, the last shielded pool that got deployed of changes of this scale. Stuff that's not parity that we would love to talk about is.
But what can I just say? Can you just scroll up a little bit?
Sure.
It mentions Plonk on the first line.
Oh, sorry.
So the
yes.
Halo 2 security proof will essentially it'll address that issue because it's Plonk doesn't have a security proof,
right?
But Halo 2 will.
Oh, great! That's fabulous. And I don't know how to make uppercase umlauted O, but thank you. That's good to know. And I'll run through these quick, and then we can get to your update, and then we can talk about all sorts of stuff.
Yep.
We would love to see a deprecation plan for Sprout ready, a plan, not an execution, by the time Orchard is activated, whenever that happens. And
Okay.
probably in the form of a zip. And I'm a co-zip editor, so I would be working on that, but we would help work on that so that we at least have a plan to see
Right.
Sprout go bye-bye before we turn on something new. So that's the one thing we'd like to see. We would love to work with you guys on a proof of concept of how to make a HSM do shielded Orchard transactions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hopefully by the time this activates, but we'll see where resources lie to do that sort of thing. I think you guys already work on this, but just to make it clear to general users, an FAQ, like when Orchard activates, when Halo activates, do my sapling addresses stop working? Do my Sprout pools stop working? What does it mean? Because we've hosted calls in the past few months and people were asking these questions, and I had to be like, no, don't worry. Like a bunch of this stuff is not going to just magically turn off, but apparently people aren't aware of that.
I mean, I guess that should be included in sapling parity, to be honest, because
yeah,
we did have similar documentation for sapling.
Fair. Maybe I'll move this around. And then the last thing, because you posted that great blog post about updates, a proposal to update to the NUP, is that we would like to see an update to the NUP, and a NUP that helps work with other implementers like us, because the old NUP was developed for a single implementer distributing to the community, and now we're trying to evolve it for multiple implementers as well. And now I will stop talking.
No, great summary, by the way. Yeah, we'd love access to that table. It's in some form, shared doc or whatever, whenever you're ready, and then we can help.
So on the Orchard security proof, I see in the notes you've got evidence that the tweaks and optimizations don't break security. So we will have that, definitely.
Fabulous. That's great.
It won't necessarily be a formal security proof that you could put in a paper.
Awesome. And yes, I can make this available imminently wherever.
No rush. Whenever.
Just put it in the chat.
Ready.
Sure.
Oh, wait a minute. Is that
I'll share it.
shared as editable?
Share it view only or whatever, so I don't accidentally. Yeah. And I'll stop sharing.
You're saying anyone with the link can edit the.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. View. There we go. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Stop share, not pause share. Stop share. There we go. I relinquished.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you, Deirdre. Yeah, and I think actually we were kind of going to check off some of those items you're going over already anyway.
Oh, I forgot one thing. We're hiring. We are hiring a cryptographic engineer, a core engineer, and a COO. And if you would like to learn more, you can go to zfoundation.org/open positions, and we've posted them all as blog posts as well. So
nice. And while we're on that vein, we're looking to hire a docs and developer relations person, and also a senior DevOps engineer. If anyone has any referrals, that would be great. And those are linked off our website, probably at electriccoin.co/careers, I think, but it's pretty easy to find, I believe. Okay, let me get the slides back up, and we'll just kind of move forward. Do you see the slides again, or did I share the wrong window?
I see Stephen Smith, Electric Coin Company.
That's it. Okay, so quick update on Zcash D. A few announcements. All these are linked off our blog. We put up the two Halo blog posts. One was kind of an overview, one was a tech explainer. And then we put out a 2020 year in review, just kind of highlighted some of the, from an engineering perspective, some of the
but by the way, it's electriccoin.co/jobs.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Dara. Appreciate it. So anyway, check those out. They're on our blog. Quick status update. We put out Zcash D release 4.2.0. We merged the data access API v1. And this is since we, kind of a summary of since we last met. Data access API is used by our wallet SDKs, and kind of makes it, it's kind of an abstraction layer. I'll just leave it at that, but it's really nice. The wallet teams had a lot of really good feedback for us. We reduced initial block download data by more than 90% by eliminating redundant block header requests and replies. Implemented developer tooling to help with circuit implementation. And then we've made, as you know, we kind of noted in some of Deirdre's slides, made great progress on the Orchard implementation. Some specific items: the gadget API migrated to the pasta curves, generic lookups and Plonk, faster square root implementation, to name a few. And then made really good progress on the various zips and specs related to NU5. The Orchard specification is about 80% done at this point. The Orchard and Halo books are coming along nicely. And zips 244 and 245 are ready to merge. If you're not familiar with those, we'll chat about those in a second, but they're essentially involve transaction malleability, transaction ID malleability fixes and transaction hashing. So, but we'll talk a bit more about that in a sec. Yeah, so Nate wanted just to add a slide on community engagement, just kind of some thoughts and updates. So Nate, if you're ready, I'll let you hop into this.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, this is just one slide. I don't want to take up too much time, but I just wanted to let everyone know that ECC, especially me, is focusing on ways to improve our community engagement. And so we have a bunch of stuff sort of in the works, and a lot of these bullets aren't really like fully baked things, but just ongoing things. So one piece there is we want to do better at clarifying and discussing and modifying the NUP, which is pretty relevant for the discussion we were just having. And also we think, given the schedules, we might be able to tweak things a little bit for NU5, but maybe a lot more for NU6 because there's more time. And doing that earlier could really have a lot of benefits. The second bullet point, I think we need to get better. And by the way, this is largely on me, not ECC engineers or marketing, but better at distinguishing between what kinds of things are we deliberating about over at ECC, even though we may not have full clarity or full alignment or understand the issue fully. Are we doing that in sort of our internal processes compared to discussing those with the community? We want to do both, and we just want to sort of clarify that distinction sometimes. And it comes up because we try to be very transparent. So you can see stuff happening like on GitHub that we are working on that we intend to be like, okay, we're preparing for a public discussion. And if it is out there in public, you're always welcome to comment on it. Just we're hoping we can like clarify when we're like preparing for a discussion versus when we're engaging with a discussion. And if that's not clear, talk to me more about this after this meeting. So another thing we would like to do is do better public tracking of sort of open issues and open questions we're looking at. Again, before we, even if it isn't related to like specific plans we have, it's just an open issue we're thinking about or discussing internally. We want to be more transparent about that so that people sort of understand where our heads are at. And also a big piece here is ensuring we're sort of engaging with the community earlier on in the R&D cycles for any new features or plans. We want to be having more of those discussions early on. A fourth thing here is that we have these monthly calls for community engagement. So one key one is this Arborist call. Another one is called the Gardening Club, and that's more general for all open source developers working on any projects related to Zcash. And we want to continue to improve those and make them engaging. So we're sort of experimenting with changes to the format a bit. And we also would love to collaborate more with more folks if they have ideas about different formats, or if they have like alternative meetings, or if if we want to like rotate who hosts meetings or anything like that, we're really interested in exploring. The final bit here is when we do notice other stuff happening, like this new Zcash community dev chat, we're gonna make an effort to really sort of jump in and participate there. So yeah, that's just like a quick spiel to let folks know we are working on some of this stuff, and it's a little bit different from the rest of this agenda, which is specifically about the NUP and NU5. So any questions about this stuff before we move on? Did I miss any in text? Yeah.
Sorry, I raised my hand and I realized you might not be able to see me raising my hand.
I couldn't. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No, sorry. All right. Would love to discuss changing or modifying the NUP, but also the wiseness of changing the engine of the plane while we're flying the engine 4 months out from NU5's current scheduled date.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I meant, where I think NU5, because yeah, the plane is on the runway, so there's not as much we can change, but there still might be things we could clarify or improve.
Especially for the next one and the next one and the ones going forward. Yeah.
I mean, it's worth pointing out that we haven't actually followed the schedule of the NUP in any previous network upgrade.
Yeah, this is one feature of the NUP is it's like an eternal ideal, and we're always adapting and improvising to make things work, which is just natural. And then we're learning how can we do that with multiple organizations and stakeholders, and so we need your help to sort that out.
Yep. All right.
Yep. So that's it.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Nathan. Appreciate that. Yeah, so just, I've got just I think a couple slides maybe, or 3 slides on this. It's more kind of meant to be open discussion kind of thing. This is kind of what we were thinking for NU5 in terms of features. Of course, zip 224. Did I get that wrong? That's not the right number. Let me back up.
It's
I think that's
225.
225. My apologies. I'm like, okay, I know that zip number's wrong. Okay. So zip 216 require canonical point encodings. As I understand it, that's the very small one.
Yeah.
About an
yeah,
hour.
Dara and I just wrote that actually before this meeting, so there's a PR up now for that. It's actually just going to focus on requiring canonical jub point encodings, because that's the only one that's actually relevant to the particular consensus issue we're trying to address.
Do you happen to know if jub/red jub are already compatible with that?
So the jub crate, no. The zip 216 is fixing a implementation oversight in the jub crate.
Okay.
So there's a note in the zip that basically, at the moment, there are no problems with currently deployed production nodes of Zcash, but if Zebra were to become production ready, it would be a problem.
Aha.
Hence, we would like to get this fixed before Zebra becomes production ready.
So would we.
I mean, the current specification is well defined, and it does allow non-canonical points at the moment. So ZebraD, if it wants to be able to sync before NU5, then it has to fix that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's the main motivation is to simplify security analysis in my mind.
Mm.
All right, zip 224, which is Halo on Zcash or Orchard. Zip 225 is version 5 transaction format. Zip 244, transaction signature validation for transparent Zcash extensions. And then 245, transaction ID non-malleability. These zips are, I think the draft's ready to merge if they haven't merged already. I know Deirdre, you and Deirdre have been.
I think we just merged them.
Okay.
Or we just approved them on Tuesday.
Okay. All right. So getting pretty close there. And then zip 250.
So Chris,
go ahead.
Chris, does zip 244, does it still include TZEs?
No, zip 244 does not include TZDs.
Yes,
it is separate. And then zip 245 is transaction. Zip 245 is the transaction is the numbers are basically reversed there.
Uh-huh.
245 is what should be 244, and 244 is what should be.
Really? Okay. I think that may be wrong.
Yes. No, yeah,
somewhere.
yeah.
Yeah, we
Yours is
changed
right.
the titles and we
Yeah,
we
the two hard problems in computer science: naming things and off-by-1 errors.
Cache invalidation.
Got all of them.
Yep. Okay. So it's something like this anyway, but we'll clarify it. How about that? We'll leave it at that. And then zip 252, that's kind of that, 251 was Canopy. So it's kind of the deployment of the NU5 network upgrade. It's got information like consensus branch ID and things of that nature in there. So,
So just to clarify, transparent Zcash extensions are not in this proposal.
Mhm.
So the transaction signature validation has to change in order to support TXID non-malleability. So that's the change there.
Yeah. And then it would obviously, given that TZDs are not being proposed for this network upgrade, if they were deployed at a subsequent network upgrade, we would need a similar transaction signature format change then to accommodate them as well.
And I know this is the ECC proposed list. Are there any other zips that are either proposed by anyone else or sort of in people's brains for NU5 that I'm not thinking of right now? I don't think so.
Not that I'm aware of.
Not for NU5.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure that we're not forgetting any of them.
Yeah.
And as a zip editor, I know that doesn't make me look good, but there's a lot of zips.
Right.
There's a lot of Z's all over the place.
Right.
There is, though, I think the NUP and the schedule hasn't been very clear. So part of publishing the schedule includes implicitly saying, hey, it's sort of like a call for zips.
Yeah.
But the timeline is pretty short, so it seems unlikely, but there still is that factor there.
Yeah.
I mean, we should really be calling for zips for NU6 now.
Yeah,
it's true.
So both, but so there was a request from chat for context on 245 non-malleability.
Oh, great.
So my video's off. Hang on. Hello.
There you are. Non-abelian rage theory.
Yeah, that was my MIT mystery hunt team. I haven't taken down the background yet.
Yes.
We had rage bosons.
Rage is an encryption system.
Oh, there's that too, but no, this is literally just rage.
This is rage. Okay, it's not rage.
Yeah. Right. So yes. So the context for non-malleability. This is effectively the proposal is to deploy in Zcash the equivalent of what Bitcoin were attempting to achieve with SegWit. So the context being that right now it's possible to alter the parts of a transaction that authenticate the transaction and authorize it. You can alter them at any point because any signature is good as long as it validates. And doing so will change the transaction ID, which breaks protocols that rely on transaction IDs only changing when the effect of a transaction changes, such as Lightning Network or Bolt, off-chain style channel type things, for example.
It also makes it more difficult for a wallet to tell whether its transaction has got onto the chain.
That's correct, yes.
So the proposal for this is effectively doing the same kind of thing as SegWit did in its limited sense because it was operating within soft forking requirements for Bitcoin. Given that we have the opportunity to do a hard forking change, the proposal here is essentially the new V5 network transaction, when a V5 is used, uses a new mechanism for computing the transaction ID and for computing SIG hashes, which means that which properly separates out the affecting data from the authorizing data. And so you have a similar concept to SegWit's TXIDs versus witness TXIDs, and then you can then appropriately treat those TXIDs the way that a lot of the off-chain protocols assumed you could do so. As a nice side benefit, it means that the transaction format in 225 is no longer consensus critical, because unlike previous versions where you just hash the entire serialized format to get the TXID, the TXID is a tree over the parts of the transaction. So the actual format on the wire is now just whatever we decide it to be between peer-to-peer nodes. So it could be altered, pruned, do whatever we want with it on the wire, rather than baking in the specific wire encoding into the consensus rules.
Right. Another application alter of that is like permissionless bridges that might use the hash time lock contracts from other chains that would need that as well. I'm aware of one potential grant application for major grants that's going to propose an Ethereum to Zcash permissionless bridge that would leverage that infrastructure. So that would be good. And then in terms of prototype implementation for the transaction ID malleability, kind of fixes, if you will, that would be deployed as part of, testnet deployment for NU5.
So they would be available within the next couple of months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, and I should say, I mean, we're just kind of putting this up here now. We're planning to kind of write up a blog post that kind of describes these in a little more detail, and I'll definitely get the zip numbers right before then. And we'll get that out.
So you actually got it the way it is on zips.z.cache. So
I knew it.
My mistake. I apologize.
I was like, gosh, I must have been in a hurry when I was like cut and paste. So, but anyway, okay, good. Well, we'll get it fixed. We'll get it sorted out anyway. Great. In terms of the timeline, we put out I think Josh dropped a link in the chat. We put out a blog post on, taking some of the feedback that we collected off of the community calls we had, the Arborist call, the protocol hangout, and then also just talking with partners and people in the community. And we kind of tried to come up with a slimmed down NUP, if you will, where it wasn't quite so busy, number one, on the diagram, but then it just kind of had the key, what we call coordination points, and, kind of, I don't know, deadlines, if you will, or anticipated timelines. But this is kind of what mapping that out roughly, knowing the workload we still have on the code side. This is kind of what that would look like for NU5. From our perspective, assuming the features that we, we're proposing would kind of make it in, but, kind of working backwards, mainnet activation would be roughly August the 1st. We would deploy to testnet. Testnet would activate roughly 3 months prior to that, so May 1st. We would, kind of officially, the draft submission deadline would be the end of February, March 1st. That's when we'd have all the zips in draft form, protocol spec done, et cetera. So like all the docs, Deirdre, like in the table you were working on, we would have draft versions of all those. The audits.
And not necessarily the Halo 2 security proof, but all of the others.
Oh, right. Not the proof, but the zips and the protocol spec updates would be done by then. We'll continue to work on the proofs. Our anticipated timeline for having scientific peer review of the protocol and the security proof is having that basic, it's a non-starter for mainnet activation if it's not done prior to that timeline, but we want to have that done before we'd ever set the mainnet activation height. So we'll be developing the proof throughout the month of March. Hopefully we'll be done by then, do the peer review in April, so well ahead of kind of when we anticipate that. But those are kind of the main items we would anticipate. Again, testnet activating roughly May 1st.
Steve, I have some questions on this. Are you done? Are you available for questions now?
On this slide, sure. Yeah, anything you have.
Cool. So when we were looking at this earlier, our team reviewed this, and one thing we noticed is there's not actually any kind of, this is actually kind of small, so I can't look at it very closely, but it doesn't seem like there's room for fixing issues with the audit. So like, it's not clear to me when you like get the audit and then there's like fixing issues with the audit. And so for example, so you have audit. I'm not sure like when you're expecting to get the audit and like how much time you are allocating for fixing any issues. Same with the security proof.
Right.
And then also with testnet. So it looks like you're doing testnet deployment. It gives you about a month. And then there's partner adoption. So I guess like our when we looked at this, it didn't look like there was a lot of wiggle room for like you find issues and then you fix them. And then like between that and like partner activation.
Yeah. So,
So
what
that,
we
do you want me to handle this?
let me
Stephen,
just
or
give you the high level, and then Dara, you can
Okay, cool.
some of the details. So we have kind of a month up here for a specification audit period, and then same for implementation audit period. In practice, those take about roughly 2 weeks each. And then we also request a mid-audit update. So once the audit starts, about a week in, we have a meeting where we kind of go over, have you found anything significant to date? Let us go ahead and start addressing that. And that's that's in both cases, specification and implementation audit. So based on, the history we have in working with some of these groups that we will engage again, we worked really well with them. We were pretty confident in these windows to address anything that, that might be found in those audits. So Dara.
So those are kind of like, it's not goes off, waits for an audit to be done, delivers it, respond. It's like it's a back and forth process.
Yeah,
Yes.
we
Okay.
don't do waterfall audits.
Okay.
Mhm. Right.
And also, so this is basically the schedule if there's no showstopper bugs. If there's a showstopper bug, then the schedule will
Yes.
change.
Right. And in that blog post, I tried to account for that. Like, this is kind of what we tossed out. If we were to run into, like, it took us longer to complete the code, for example, code completion timeline took a little longer, or the audit, took longer than we anticipate. Or the audit turned up some things that we needed to, change in either the specification or the code that, resulted in more than we kind of buffer in. Then of course the dates would be subject to change after that as well.
Yeah, it looks a little tight. So like also, for example, the zip review, again, obviously these are just like boxes on a screen, but we looked at this and we're like, wow, this looks really tight. So like the zip review and then the specification audit, like I would assume there would be like, you would do the audit and then the zip at the end is what gets merged in, right? So like, it's kind of unclear to me. So like your zip should be frozen, you have the audit, you fix it, then you like make the like fixes up to the zip, and then we review that again. So
this
Sorry,
is,
Stephen, can I just a quick
absolutely.
process interrupt? Can you give voice to Tior and Sean?
Yeah.
Or make them
sorry.
panelists?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
Let me do that really
Thanks.
quickly. Bear with me. Yeah, keep so yeah, one thing, so I'm gonna let me get taken care of, and then Sean. I don't see Sean. Let me see.
I'm right here.
Oh.
Wait.
Oh.
I was going to say, I thought Sean...
Wait, I can already talk. Oh, okay. Hi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
Never mind.
So a couple of comments, and then others can jump in there as well. So this zip review period, right? Like, so zips are continually reviewed, meaning like Deirdre and Dara as zip editors, the 244 and 245, for example, they're already kind of reviewed it. But this is the draft zip submission deadline. And then typically what you get in the specification audit in particular is like, oh, you could make the zip a little clearer, or the spec a little clearer, this verbiage is unclear, or whatever. So you kind of tweak the zip in here. This zip review is specifically for, okay, what zips would folks like to see in the network upgrade? And then there's this period of time to look over, evaluate, talk to the teams. Nate, I think you had some thoughts on this that you were thinking of discussing today as well. This might be a good time to do that if you wanted.
About zip review, I don't...
Like feature selection and kind of how that works, or you want to...
Oh, yes. So
Okay.
Let me just say one thing about zip review is I want to find ways moving forward to encourage more people to explicitly participate in zip review. Like there could be someone who's not in ECC or ZF and not a zip editor who likes to show up and review zips and earns a reputation for being good at that. I would like to find ways to open the door for that. That's just a general goal.
I have learned a lot while being a zip editor, and it keeps me up to date on everything that's being submitted by people. But myself and Dara are only two people. Breadth and depth in specific areas and across the ecosystem, and also like, oh, we tried this over in Ethereum and we ran into these problems, or this is a non-obvious catch that you might like in this sort of design, or whatever it might be. More people would be great. One idea that comes to the top of my head is the zip editor meetings are basically myself and Dara, and sometimes someone else comes in because they are like, oh, we're gonna review the zip that you have pushed changes to today, like come join us to the call or whatever. Maybe we make that a little more public and just say, hey, here's the call every week or so, in one of the discords or on the forum or something like that, just to be like, we're going to be reviewing zips. It's going to be like, we have the red ink on the GitHub and like comma here, math here, but we're doing it.
Right.
I mean, it's worth pointing out that the vast majority of edits to zips are editorial.
Yes.
Right. Very good point.
It's quite rare that a zip has got to the draft stage and needs a complete rework. That doesn't happen, basically.
Yeah. So that, and let me just clarify something I said. I wasn't meaning to imply that should suffice in terms of reviewing zips. And that zip editor process that was just described is more to ensure that zips are well specified. It's not a yes, this makes sense to include in a network upgrade type call. It's just, are they well specified so they could be considered, is essentially that function.
And also like a security sniff test.
Right.
Security and cryptography sort of like, if it has a stink, we'll let you know early.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And then, so this was one of the specific things we chatted about in the different community calls was, is this felt like about right in terms of a month for this period to make a decision on feature selection. And then this quote, partner adoption is time active on testnet prior to mainnet activation is kind of a targeted 3-month window. We start engaging our partners well ahead of that and working with them in various ways, depending on what type partner that it is. If we were to turn up anything in here that didn't look like we wanted it to look, then of course that would elongate the times, as we mentioned earlier in the call.
So I have a follow-up question. I'll ask the hard question. So let's say something turns up, whether that's in the specification audit or implementation, or so now in the Zcash network, we have 2 nodes that need to be interoperable. We're going to find bugs. So let's say this timeline slips and it goes, let's say it slips 2 to 3 months. What happens then?
Okay. So I guess it's within the realm of probability, but I would be shocked if anything came out of either the specification or implementation audits that caused us any kind of significant delay. And that's just based on the historical success that we've had with audits. So that's kind of a, it absolutely could. It's not outside the realm.
Yeah, it's technically possible to for a particular feature to end up not being deployed, and we've had that before. So for example, in Blossom, there was a proposal to do harmony mining, which was just completely scrapped.
And then we also had in was it Heartwood as well, which was the one where we designed funding streams, and we actually that was part of the audit. We had that in the audit as part of the set of features, and then it was decided that there wasn't the impetus to deploy it, so we actually had to extract that out and separate that out from its interaction with ZIP 208, the shorter block spacing. And then we had that zip sitting there audited, and that's what ended up getting used for Canopy for the dev fund.
Right. So the timeline in general kind of assumes the historical norms that we've experienced with other network upgrades. This would be the 6th. Having said that, it kind of depends on what's found. It could be a reduction in scope, as Dara mentioned, like we don't include something in a network upgrade. We would collectively meet with everyone, obviously, and discuss what are the options. if the timeline did need to adjust, by how much, and collect feedback there. But
That's an
So I have
interesting
a-
point
Sorry, I just have a
because
follow-up to that. Sorry, Deirdre.
go ahead.
Sure.
Sure.
So, okay, so as like partners in this, we're also doing this planning.
Sure.
So what
Right.
is the expectation of timeline that we should know before this go or no go? Like that's not going to be August, right? That's going to be like
I mean,
May.
No, the no-go has to be before the end of May because that's on the schedule where the activation height is specified. If there's going to be a slip, it has to be decided before that point.
Right.
Okay.
It's because once a production node, of which there's only Zcash at the moment, but eventually ZebraD as well, once there are production nodes that specify an activation height for a given set of consensus rules, that's out there. That's going to get installed and run by people, and we have to run with it. So we cannot commit to that final checkpoint until we're all happy with it.
Right.
Okay, so we should be
That's all
like end of May, like on
Yes.
our end. Okay, great.
In the case of a security bug, for example, being found after the mainnet release, we just release a fix and ask everyone to upgrade, and that's still possible after that point. But we would aim not to have to do that, obviously.
Exactly. We want to have the assurances in place that we're confident that won't need to happen. And if we aren't for a subset of things, then as Derek and Stephen said, like we can look at options like leaving pieces out so that the pieces that we are confident in can continue to be activated.
that's a good point because I was just looking at the list proposed and sort of like, okay, what could be left out? And it seems like besides the canonical point encoding for jub, the transaction ID, non-malleable zips, the rest are orchard and highly interrelated. And I don't think that any of those can go by themselves.
So,
am I
so
understanding
TXID
correctly?
non-malleability kind of go, so Orchard requires transaction changes because it introduces new pieces. The TXID non-malleability zip requires a transaction version bump as well because it changes the interpretation of things. And it would be nice, I guess, to couple the non-canonical jub with that as well, but it's not really required. That's just a consensus rule change. So you could separate out the Orchard and its transaction version changes from the non-malleability and its transaction version changes, for instance. So if one of those had an issue, it would be possible to deploy the other.
That's similar to what we did for zips 207 and 208.
But the rest are kind of stuck together.
Well, so if Stephen, can you go back to that list?
Orchard is stuck together, yes.
Go back to what list? I'm so sorry. The list of zips. I'm so sorry. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So 224 is a single unit. 245 is a single unit. 244 depends on 245 in a sense, as in it's tied together. But 244 also covers pieces that are relevant for Orchard. But if, for example, Orchard was moved out of NU5, you would modify 244 to remove those pieces. And likewise, if non-malleability was moved out, you would probably actually, because 244 is closer to 245, you would probably do a much smaller, akin to what like 243 was for sapling change that just briefly modifies.
Okay, and then 252 is just, this is NU5 or whatever.
Yeah, consensus branch ID.
Right. Okay, so it looks like the three chunks of work that can go independently are canonical point encodings, transaction non-malleability and signature validation, and Orchard. And Orchard is Orchard and the V5 transaction format. So just to what we're talking about of what can be left out or has to go together or whatever. That were to happen.
If Orchard went, then we would probably still move to a V5 transaction format in order to get the transaction non-malleability in.
Right.
Yeah, both non-malleable, because you're changing the interpretation of TXID, you only want to do that over if people are using V4 transactions, it's easier, well, at least I think it's easier in terms of rollout for people to not have to deal with modifying how people, like if you have a v4, you know you can just use the code you have to parse that, because the v5 is quite a different TXID mechanism in order to get the necessary non-malleability properties.
I see. So
Like
we
we
can't.
could have designed the non-malleability to apply to all previous transaction formats, but that seemed like a lot more pain for the ecosystem than was actually required. Whereas anyone who requires non-malleability can just go and use a v5 transaction.
And eventually there will be a point at which we want to remove the ability to use v4 transactions.
Yes. So everything but 216 are quite coupled.
They're coupled, but it's kind of straightforward to decouple them.
Okay.
I mean, assuming we have time.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and 225 is also something that is going to be implementable separately. I mean, 225 in some respects, I would say depends upon 244, because making a consensus or change to the transaction format without making the wire format irrelevant with respect to consensus wouldn't make sense. So 225 depends upon 244, but it is well suited to serve Orchard, but you could literally just truncate the new v5 transaction format, and then you would have you would leave out the Orchard bits. That's about basically it.
So separable, but requires work. Okay.
Okay.
I relinquish.
So, yeah, I think
we're talking a couple of days of work, I think.
Yeah, and not like a significant time. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So the deadline of end of May is helpful for us, because we're looking at, so on our end, we're looking at end of May to August, as we need to integrate all of those zips and also test interoperability on the network. So that's
well, actually, you can start. Yeah, you could start doing the implementation.
We don't have a spec.
We don't have a spec,
Well,
and there's
you'll have a
audit.
spec by the end of February. That's what this is, a draft spec at any rate.
But we're also waiting on the
that's good.
audits. So I mean,
well, if you're going to wait on the audits before you start implementing, then sure, you'd be implementing in here. So.
Yeah.
Although I'd recommend, I mean, but that's up to you. That's a decision internally for you. So, okay. All right. So time check. We got about 20 minutes. So I think we're good on time. But I'll keep going. I think I just have one more slide. Any other questions specifically on this one? Or Nate, you had a comment. I'm so sorry. I can't see the participants, but I did see it in chat. So go ahead.
Yeah. So it was to sort of pop up a level, because Chelsea's question was really good. Like, what if it gets delayed 3 months? And that ties into like some constraints and decisions and practices we have at ECC that sometimes I forget to make explicit for newcomers. So one of those is, it's a high priority for us, and this, we could discuss how to change this in the future, but so far historically, it's been a high priority to have multiple 2 upgrades per year, based on a belief that keeping sort of the rhythm going is better for being able to make upgrades and handle tech debt, and for the ecosystem to be familiarized with what that process is like, so on and so forth. So that is a rationale for doing 2 upgrades per year. And now so if you accept that that's a goal or a constraint, then if one upgrade starts getting delayed, it starts running into the other upgrade. So if you ask, like, what happens if the schedule gets delayed a month, that's an easier answer than 3 months, because 3 months means it's either piling up on the next upgrade, or we postpone all future upgrades and sort of slide the whole schedule into the future. And so I just wanted to point out, those are some constraints that we are implicitly operating with. So we have a general pattern or behavior where if there seems to be a delay, if it's not too big, we try to push it in and slip things around. If it's too big, we try to generally kick things out into a later release and save, like just reduce the scope, which is what the discussion was just about for those NU5 features. How could we reduce the scope? So yeah, I just wanted to share all of that context that's sort of leading into how ECC is approaching this and the constraints we're operating with and a bit of rationale. So that's something we can discuss more in the future for future upgrades.
So what was the original date for NU5? Was it the end of June?
No, we never had a date per se. We said summer 2021. That was the only thing we ever put out, that what we projected.
Okay. Well, I was operating under the assumption that it was June 2020. But so if we operate under that assumption, which seems to be inaccurate, but it seems like this is slipping by at least a month. The schedule, the platonic ideal of the NUP, which has never actually been reached in reality, but we always strive towards it in the past, is being squished somewhat. So where is the breaking point between we're trying to get a whole bunch of stuff done for a big new pool with new technology, with a new proving system, with new this, new that, and whatever, and we can like make it, but as Dara mentioned, we're not leaving any room in case something bad happens or something, either a catastrophic result from an audit, which knock wood, that doesn't happen, but it could just be simply like fixes aren't working, or it's not behaving well on testnet, or it breaks something major for one of our integrators or something like that, and we don't have a lot of wiggle room in the schedule. So where is the cutoff point between pushing this slightly more and just saying, let's give us the breathing room to really stick the landing for Orchard and move it to NU6, or at least target NU6 for the latter half of this year? Where's that margin?
So just to clarify something, I didn't mean to imply that there was no wiggle room in this schedule.
Okay.
There is wiggle room, just not very much.
Okay, not much wiggle room if something catastrophic happens.
I think also
okay.
our estimates are not, so I guess like it's also not clear how like our estimates as like the alternative implementation for Zcash factors into this. So I think along with the NUP discussion, we need to kind of think about like partner adoption, this like 3 months. I mean, as a team, we haven't really talked about like, is that enough? Is that enough time? And like, is it important to the Zcash ecosystem to have 2 implementations that both deploy on mainnet at the same time? Like, I think it is, but we're not leaving ourselves a lot of room to do that. So,
right. So I've got several responses. Go ahead. Yeah.
ZBRD is not constrained to follow this timing of testnet release and mainnet release,
right?
Because you don't have the same policies around.
We are if we want to interoperability test with you.
And there's also a coordination point that Strad highlighted. So here on this diagram, it says Zcash mainnet support release. That Zcash schedule isn't what we need to coordinate on, but we do need to coordinate on when we nail down the activation height.
Yes.
Which was a great point by Strad. So whenever that decision needs to be made is when we have to agree on what the height is.
I'd love to hear Hudson's thoughts and a quick perhaps overview of how Ethereum deals with this.
Yeah, we are haphazard at best, but I would say that's good and bad. And here's the reason. We have 4 clients that are on mainnet at the same time that all interop. Throughout the implementation of the code that's ongoing, we have both manual testing and fuzz testing that happens. I don't know if you all have a I guess you can't have a cross client interoperability fuzz testing suite yet because the clients aren't interoperating right now. But when that happens, that's going to give people a lot more like peace of mind, hopefully, for the if things are going to break on mainnet. because we always worry about what if things break on mainnet. And the cool thing is if there's multiple clients, multiple implementations of a spec, and one breaks and the other stays online, at least a portion of the network is still going. So there would have to be a bug in both clients, and that would be at the spec level. So that's kind of one thing to think about. As far as timing goes, we usually go in and we have about 3 weeks for people to install a release after we've decided on an activation date, which is about a month to 2 months in advance. So we go hard. Yeah,
That's real tight.
yeah, that's real tight.
Another
And the thing is, we have a lot of people who like go in and like talk to exchanges and miners, and people just have to, it's almost like on them to keep up with the ecosystem, but it's a little bit different because I guess like CoinDesk and stuff like loudly announce. I guess they do for Zcash too. So I don't know. Maybe it's a similar thing with Zcash. Did you have something, Nate?
Oh, I had a question. So when I mentioned this sort of goal we have of shipping at a regular rate, does Ethereum, do Ethereum core developers try to ship on a schedule, and if things aren't working, they pare down the scope? Or do they try to get a set of features ready and right, and they ship it when it's ready? Because I see those as sort of the two options of a trade-off.
I can see that a bit as a trade-off. It's ship when it's ready for sure. It's security first, ship when it's ready. Before doing any kind of like, we need to do it by this time. We have rough timelines that our hard fork coordinator and people like myself discuss and then bring to the devs to say, here's the timing. We have like an independent hard fork network upgrade like liaison who kind of does a lot of this like estimating, and they just talk to all the client teams all the time, and they kind of get embedded and get the updates, so it's less talk on the core calls. There's also a lot of asynchronous discussion and like cross-team discussion in the chat rooms and on the forum and stuff like that that help with that. So to answer your question, yeah, it's when it's ready is much more important than how many you do a year or if they're at a certain time. Because at this point, if you're a major exchange, you have the capability and the engineering resources and things like that to very quickly install and test a new client over the course of a month at minimum, but usually they want more time. So I mean, depending on who your partners are or like beyond exchanges, what Zcash uses, that's going to do, I guess, factor in here. But I would say that it's less important to have scheduled, like really like we need to have 2 a year, or we need to have this by this date kind of a thing, more so than just getting the stuff you want in there.
And a follow-up question, how does it work? You know, you've got multiple implementation teams who are working off a single spec. You know, what is the sort of process for finalizing that spec and saying, right, this is now frozen, this is not going to change, it's not going to be corrected or evolved or enhanced or et cetera, and then saying, right, this is what you can now begin to build against, and you can rely that it's not going to change?
Yeah, so that's with our EAPS process, which are just like zips. And so basically we've actually edited it recently. So there's like a last call period where after review and bringing up to the all core devs calls, we separated it. The network upgrade process is now separate from the EIPs. So the EIPs can go into whatever states it wants to, and that doesn't affect the network upgrade necessarily. In fact, I think we changed the definition or took out the word final from one of our statuses, so it could be separate. The reason we did that was because now when we're in the call, we can say, well, the core developers think this implementation or this idea is really good. Let's start to test and implement it. So someone starts to test and implement it, and one client and then the other one say, that looks good, we're going to implement it now too. And that can happen outside of the EAPs beyond it needing to be in at least draft format. And then it goes from draft to last call. That's a 2-week period for any other final objections after thorough review in the draft stage. And then it goes into like, I think it goes into final, but it's not related to if it's on the network anymore now. It can be final status without being on the network. We now have a separate repo in GitHub that tracks when things go on the network, which EIPs and that kind of thing.
That sounds
And you mentioned objections. What, like if, like, let's say someone proposes something, it goes through that process, and then you know, some of the teams aren't ready. what happens then? Does it get forced through, or
If the teams, so the objection would be the team's not ready, like they haven't implemented it. Is that the question?
for yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, rather than
for whatever reason the objection is.
Oh, so for the objection could be this is unsafe. This could break smart contracts. How many does it break? Do we want to go through with that? That can kind of be the objections. There can be community input, like for instance, an issuance reduction. Well, that's one of our more controversial ones for mining. Like we're overpaying miners. Let's get the issuance down. Some people say stuff like that. So that one, that's where community kind of comes in more. For the most part, because all this stuff is very protocol and low level, as long as it's a net positive for the ecosystem and it's not something major or affecting minor profits or stuff like that, then it usually doesn't get a lot of community feedback. It's more the core devs talking to the core devs and reviewing on the GitHub PR and in the forums what should be changed on there. So objections aren't objections like this shouldn't go in. It's more objections like this should be tweaked. Full objections to not going in, because we work on rough consensus similar to how Zcash does it, usually people will back down if their idea is widely disliked. We've had a few cases where there are super controversial issues like a change in consensus algorithm to kick off ASICs and stuff like that, which I think Zcash faced a similar thing before. And that is kind of a different story. But if it's non-controversial at a community level, then basically it's all technical discussion at the core dev calls, and most people just agree or take lead from some of the leaders in the community, like people from some of the Geth team or the Nethermind team, which are two of the clients. And yeah, they kind of they provide historical perspective and then give a technical explanation of what needs to go in, and then it's discussed. But that's always happens on the forums in Async before it comes to the call.
Thank you, Hudson.
Can you talk more about the controversial cases? Because I like to do failure mode analysis.
We have about 5 minutes time check wise. So
maybe we should switch to next steps then and discuss that later.
I had one more slide.
I would love to hear about failure cases. So maybe like
sure.
I mean,
eventually.
Real quick for failure cases, like basically if it's controversial, like ProgPow, it ended up not going in because the community was loud enough and there was enough vociferousness that they were like, this could be a split, or even if it wouldn't be a split, we don't know if it's important enough, yada, yada. It didn't happen. For an actual failure case, like an implementation having a bug, that happened in Geth, our client that has 80% of the network share. They decided to secretly patch it and not reveal that. That was controversial. It actually caused our external, it's Infura is the service, it's like external node service. They were running an old version, someone activated the bug and it took down a lot of the network and caused a split just with Infura nodes, but that's a lot of the network. So it was a wonky situation for a little bit, but the network never went down. So as long as there's multiple clients running and you can quickly bring infrastructure up for those other clients or something, then you're good.
So I have a question for you. You have, what are the major like consensus clients in Ethereum? What would be like the top 3?
There's like a stats page I can like send out later, but it would be like what's it called? 80% Geth, and then 10% this other one, and then 5% the other two. So it's very dominant Geth right now.
So just a few at the top and then some others after that. And are they typically all ready from a spec implementation perspective?
They are all syncing with the network currently. Some are slower than others at implementing, and so we just wait for them. Or they might just say, we're deprecating our client. There's clients that have come online and then gone offline because they couldn't keep up.
Right. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Did you have a question, Adair?
No, I was just going to say that the situation with 80% Geth is kind of similar to how it is likely to be for quite a while with with Zcash and ZebraD.
Yeah, and that's an unsolved problem in Ethereum world with how to get people going on there. I guess finding niches, like one of them's better for mining, one of them's better for exchanges, one of them does complete archive node sync faster because it has a different database in the back end, like that kind of thing. That's what's starting to differentiate clients. Like we have one client that's a Turbo Geth, and it can sync an archive node in 3 days where it takes 30 days for a Geth node. So that's going to start to be used more widely. And yeah, there's other stuff too. Just find a niche.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So yeah, so actually Deirdre just had a really great suggestion, maybe doing these, make a longer meeting, which is an hour and 20 minutes now. So make it longer, do it every like twice a month instead of once a month. So we'll
I
discuss
highly
that.
recommend doing it twice a month. We do it every
Yeah.
2 weeks, and once a month it would be, especially for people who have to miss and stuff, would be too slow. Also, the capability to live stream this, so it's immediately on YouTube instead of having any delay period and uploading helps a lot.
Yeah, I looked at how Ethereum did that particular part. In fact, I think you had written this phenomenal guide to how you did the whole thing, like live streams.
Yeah, I have a guide on how to stream live using OBS and getting it on YouTube.
Right, that was it.
Awesome.
OBS, yeah. So we could look at that. We could look at doing it, a couple times a month, every 2 weeks or whatever. But let's take that. We'll take that conversation offline, see what works for.
I'll make a chat channel for Arborist calls in the Zcash R&D chat server, so we can talk about that.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yep, cool.
Okay, so whenever that next call is, whether it's a couple weeks or half a month or a month, let's continue this conversation. I had one more slide to get to, which was really a screenshot of that kind of list of things from your blog post, like, oh, we'd like to see this, like the spec audits and that kind of thing. So it was just, we talked about a fair amount of that, Deirdre, in your table, but it was just to kind of, I didn't know you were going to have that. Obviously, you didn't know I would have the thing as well. So let's just minimally plan on continuing, talking about timelines. Obviously, we can provide an update on how well we're progressing. And that's super important to, if there is, if any schedule or timeline or coordination point is in doubt, then the sooner we can raise that as an issue, the better, obviously. So minimally, we'll plan on covering those bases next time.
Yeah, I think basically the summary was that we had no significant disagreements with what you'd written in that blog post. That we agree that those things are necessary.
Okay.
Great.
I think I'd like to lock down and get absolute crystal clarity about what is necessary, and agreements that the things that we agree are necessary are showstoppers, and that we're not gonna push forward with deployment without things like, so for example, on the diagram that you guys have published, I don't see the science review. I don't see stuff like security proofs and so on. So I think
right. We
getting agreement on those things, I think, is really, really important, because I think there's a real risk that things like that, if for whatever reason they're not done in time, they just don't happen. And with the nature of this upgrade, I think that those things are really, really essential. I think they're really, really important, because they drastically reduce the risk that we're facing with the new technology that's being deployed. So I think agreeing exactly what is necessary and committing to not progressing without those things being complete is something that we'd like to discuss very soon.
It sounds like it would be useful for you to show that slide, Stephen, and we can just go through and.
Well, we're out of time today, so.
Okay.
Yeah, right. We'll bring that up next time. So.
And
again, we
let's
can
continue in the
discussion.
Discord channel.
Right. So what's missing? Just general caveat. What's missing from that little diagram? And by the way, I'm not the most graphically talented person. I kind of put that together. Is the description that goes along with it. Did Strad just agree with me? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, Dodger used to do our diagrams.
So anyway, okay, I'm doing my best.
That's very diplomatic of you.
Audit, right? We have like spec audits, Dodger implementation audit, which you all know, like sometimes it's just software and protocol audit, right? There's no new crypto or anything. Peer review is not necessary because again, there's no new crypto. But in the description of that item in the blog post, I put, always software and protocol security assessments. And then if there's new crypto, scientific peer review, crypto audits. So I think we need to take that and let Geffen do his magic on the diagram and kind of add that text spec in there. But absolutely, to your point, agreeing for a point in time for NU5, what are the absolute things that we agree on must be done, and before proceeding. Yep, perfect. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Deirdre, everyone, we'll kind of sync up, we'll sync up async on how frequent we want to do this and how long the meeting should be. So we'll take care of
Party
that.
invite in the chat. Party invite in the chat for an Ethereum Zcash meetup after ETH Denver, which is an Ethereum conference that's happening. So there's a link in the forums.
Cool.
Okay. And I'll do a shout out for Ying Tong. She is fresh off an ETH Denver panel
Yeah, I
and
just
joined
came
this
from
call.
there.
Yeah, she just wrapped up a panel that she was on. So we'll have to get that recording and share it out for everyone to see. All right. Well, thanks very much, everyone. Really appreciate everyone's time, and have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, Stephen.
Bye.
All right.
See ya.
Bye all. Thanks.